Okay, so have you ever like taken a picture of a book you were reading, for Instagram?
Yeah.
Or maybe you were scrolling through Bookstagram and kind of felt that book envy thing?
Oh, yeah, totally.
I know I have. Well, today we're going deep on how exactly the online world is changing, like how we experience reading.
It's such a fascinating topic.
Right. And to help us with this deep dive, we're going to be looking at this video from a booktuber named Murphy Napier.
I've seen her stuff. She's really insightful.
Yeah, and she's been, kind of thinking about this whole shift to digital reading. So we're going to unpack her insights and explore how social media is influencing, well, everything from the books we choose to, like how we see ourselves as readers.
It's wild how much it affects us, isn't it?
Totally.
What I find so interesting about Napier's take is that she, embraces the complexity of it all. She's not afraid to talk about both the positive and, maybe the not so positive aspects of this whole digital book world.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that really stood out to me was her point about the pressure to read more now that we have these online book communities. It's like this unspoken competition.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone's trying to, whack up those Goodreads numbers. Have you ever felt that?
Oh, all the time. It's hard not to compare yourself.
Right. I catch myself looking at other people's reading lists and feeling like, oh, I should be reading more.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Or I need to read that book.
Social media kind of breeds this scarcity mindset, right? We're constantly bombarded with images and posts about what other people are doing and reading, and it makes us hyper aware of what we're not.
It's like FOMO, but for books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it plays into this very human tendency to compare ourselves to others, especially in areas we care about, like reading.
I know, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of people, reading is more than just a hobby. It's part of their identity.
For sure. So it makes sense that we'd be more sensitive to these comparisons online.
Totally. Napier even talked about feeling like she had to, apologize for reading a bunch of books one month because a lot of them were short. It's funny, but it's also kind of messed up when you think about it. Is there some unspoken rule that longer books equal a better reader?
Right. Like you said, it's funny, but it also points to a deeper issue here, which is this whole phenomenon of performative reading.
Performative reading?
Yeah, it's this idea that we're increasingly reading for an audience.
Yeah.
For those likes and the validation,
Yeah.
rather than just for the pure enjoyment of it. And that can really take away from the personal, almost introspective experience that reading can offer.
That's an interesting point. Okay, but isn't sharing what we're reading a natural thing to do? I mean, haven't we always kind of signaled our taste in books? Whether it's through our bookshelves or book clubs or even just the books we carry around with us. Is this online version really that different?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
You're right. People have always found ways to share their literary taste, but social media magnifies everything. It turns reading into a much more public performance.
We're always on stage.
Yeah. And the sheer volume of content we're exposed to can create this feeling of never enough, which I think feeds into that anxiety and comparison we were talking about earlier.
Oh, totally. And then there's the whole visual aspect of book culture online. Right? The perfectly staged photos, those aesthetic flat lays, everything has to be #Bookstagram worthy. Napier actually joked about how it's kind of like those old paintings of people posing with books, just, a modern day version.
It's true, though. And it's funny because, in a way, it is a modern version of that. Humans have always sought ways to express themselves and connect over shared interests, and books have always been a part of that. But digital age has taken this to a whole new level. Now we can connect with people across the globe who share our love of reading. It's amazing, but it can also be, like you said, a bit overwhelming at times.
So where does all of this leave us? Is online book culture just this pressure cooker of competition and comparison? Is that all it is?
Not necessarily. Remember, Napier sees both sides of the coin here. She acknowledges that there's nothing inherently wrong with romanticizing reading or creating beautiful book-themed content. And she also highlights the incredible sense of community and shared passion that can be found in online book spaces.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, think about how BookTube can introduce us to genres and authors we might never have discovered otherwise, or how it can connect readers who share a love for a particular book or series. It's pretty powerful when you think about it.
Absolutely. It's incredibly valuable, especially for those who might feel isolated in their offline lives, like they don't have anyone to talk to about books. These communities offer a sense of belonging, of being seen and understood, which can be incredibly powerful.
So it's not just doom and gloom then. There's a real potential for good here too.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Napier encourages us to, explore different parts of the bookish internet and discover communities that feel authentic and supportive, free of pressure and judgment. engagement.
That's so important, finding your tribe, those people who get you and your reading quirks, without feeling like you have to perform or compete.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that reading, at its core, is a personal journey.
Oh, and speaking of journeys, Napier had this really cool analogy. She compared reading to a river. What did you think of that?
Ah, yes, the river analogy. I loved it. It perfectly captures the dynamic, ever-changing nature of reading, right?
I know, like a river, reading is always flowing, evolving, adapting to the terrain.
It's a really beautiful way of looking at it. It's like she's saying that reading has always been this evolving thing, and the internet is just the latest bend in the river.
And just as a river carves new paths over time, the essence of the river remains the same. It's still water flowing toward a destination.
Exactly. And in the same way, reading at its core remains about connecting with stories, with ideas, with ourselves.
Wow, that is deep.
But it's so true, isn't it?
It is. So the big question is, how do we navigate this digital river of reading? How do we make sure we don't get swept away by the currents?
That's where Napier's advice gets really practical. She encourages viewers to dive into different corners of the bookish internet. Like we were saying before, it's all about finding those communities that resonate with you, right?
Yeah.
She even suggests checking out her community tab on her channel.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's full of suggestions. It's a great place to start if you're looking to explore different online book spaces and find your niche.
Like she's giving us a map for this whole digital reading world.
Yeah.
But even with a map, it's still up to us to, chart our own course, right?
And that's such a key takeaway here, defining reading on your own terms. Like what brings you joy? What books do you love? What kind of community feels right for you?
Yeah. Have you ever thought about that, like in relation to your own reading?
All the time.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing online.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But ultimately, reading is like such a personal experience. It's about finding the books and the communities that speak to your individual, tastes and interests.
Yeah, so even if everyone on your feed is like raving about that new fantasy epic, it's totally okay if you'd rather like curl up with a cozy mystery.
Absolutely. Or, the other way around.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way to be a reader. The important thing is that you're honoring your own preferences and finding those spaces where you feel comfortable and inspired.
Okay, so let's say you have found your little bookish tribe online. You're sharing recommendations, maybe even posting those, aesthetically pleasing book photos. But what about this whole debate about real reading? Have you ever come across that?
Yes, it's everywhere.
I feel like it pops up all the time.
It's this idea that some formats or genres are like better than others.
Like more legit.
Yeah. And usually, physical books are at the top, and then ebooks and audiobooks are somehow less legitimate.
I've definitely felt that pressure. Like, if I'm not holding a physical book, am I even really reading? It makes you like second guess yourself, even if you're really enjoying the experience.
Right. And it's so interesting because like technology sparks these debates about authenticity.
It's true.
And this isn't new either. Think about it. Certain genres like romance novels, YA, even graphic novels have historically been dismissed as like lesser forms of literature.
Like there's always a gatekeeper trying to define what counts.
Exactly.
But Napier pushes back against that, right?
She does. She argues that every genre, every format has the potential to, connect with readers on a deeper level. And she really emphasizes that these debates often boil down to personal taste and preference, which makes sense, right? It can be influenced by your age, your background, your cultural context.
Yeah. What might be super meaningful for one person could be totally boring for someone else.
Exactly.
It's such a good reminder that reading is subjective. We shouldn't let anyone else tell us what we should or shouldn't enjoy.
Totally. So instead of getting caught up in these arguments about real reading, maybe we should just be celebrating like the diversity of reading experiences out there.
Yes, 100%. So how does the internet fit into this whole idea of inclusivity in the reading world?
Well, for all its complexities, the internet has actually played a big role in like democratizing reading.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's given a voice to readers who maybe felt marginalized or excluded in traditional literary circles. Have you noticed that online?
Yeah. It seems like there's a space for everyone, regardless of what you like to read.
Exactly. And it's so refreshing to see such a wide range of perspectives and tastes represented. You can find online communities for any genre you can think of, from like classic lit to, the most niche subgenres you've never even heard of.
Right.
And it's incredible. The internet has created these spaces where readers can connect with others who share their passions, regardless of background, format preferences, or what genres they love. It's really broadened broaden the definition of what it means to be a reader.
It sounds like the internet has created a more level playing field for readers in a lot of ways.
In many ways, yes. But remember, like any powerful tool, it's important to use it mindfully. Remember those currents and undertows we talked about?
Right.
All those things you have to be careful of.
Yeah, like the pressure to keep up with everyone else's reading list or that constant comparison thing that can happen online.
Exactly. Definitely things to watch out for. And one of the biggest undertows, I think, is this idea that reading is in decline because of the internet. Napier spends some time unpacking this, and it's like a fascinating perspective.
Oh yeah, she did. She pointed out that people have been complaining about the decline of reading for centuries. It's always the latest technological advancement, the printing press, the radio, the television.
It's like this narrative that pops up every time a new medium comes along.
Yeah.
But history shows us that reading has always adapted and evolved alongside these advancements. It may look different, but that core desire to connect with stories and ideas, it remains.
Yeah. So maybe instead of seeing the internet as like this threat to reading, we should be thinking about it as an opportunity to, redefine what reading can be in the 21st century. It's not about holding on to old formats or gatekeeping genres. It's about embracing the possibilities that this new landscape has to offer.
Yes, exactly. The internet has expanded our possibilities for engaging with literature in ways that we couldn't have imagined just a few decades ago. It's created these new avenues for discovery, for connection, for sharing our love of books, and it's really up to each of us to explore those possibilities and figure out what works best for us as individuals.
But it's overwhelming. There's so much information coming at us online all the time. It can be hard to know where to even start. I feel like it's not even just about reading anymore. It's about filtering and processing all this information and figuring out what's actually valuable and meaningful to us.
That's a brilliant point. You're so right. In this digital age, it's not just about how much we read, it's how we read, how we filter, how we process, how we make meaning of the information that's constantly bombarding us.
It almost makes you wonder if that whole reading is dying narrative is missing the point. Maybe reading isn't dying. It's just not evolving.
I love that. It's such an interesting way to look at it. Maybe reading is just taking on new forms, adapting to this digital landscape in ways that, we're still trying to figure out.
It makes me think about Napier's final thought, the question she leaves us with. It feels especially relevant after everything we've just been talking about.
Yeah, I agree. It's the perfect question to guide us as we navigate this new world of reading. It's a question each of us needs to answer for ourselves.
So what was that question, the one she leaves us with?
It's a powerful one. She asks, how can we embrace the connection and discovery that online book spaces offer while staying true to, the personal, joyful essence of reading?
Ooh, I like that. It's like a challenge almost.
Yeah. It is. It challenges us to think about how we can navigate this whole digital reading landscape without, losing sight of why we fell in love with reading in the first place.
It's a good reminder. So, what would you say? How do we do that?
Well, I think, awareness is a good place to start.
Okay.
Take a moment. Just reflect on your own reading habits. How has, the online world, how's it influenced your reading choices?
Right.
What do you love about online book communities? What feels draining or overwhelming? Once you have a better understanding of your own needs and preferences, then you can start making more conscious choices about how you're engaging with digital reading.
So it's about being intentional, maybe setting some boundaries for yourself, limiting how much time you spend on social media, or maybe, being more picky about the accounts you follow.
Exactly. And it could also mean, seeking out online communities that really align with your values and your interests, right? Places where you feel supported and inspired, not pressured or judged.
Yeah.
And honestly, sometimes the best thing you can do is just disconnect from the digital world entirely.
Yeah, take a break.
Yeah, sometimes the best way to reconnect with the joy of reading is to unplug, get lost in a book, no distractions.
Create a little sanctuary for yourself.
Yes, I love that. A reading sanctuary could be a cozy corner in your home, a favorite spot at a library, or even just, a mental space where you can just shut everything out and get lost in a story.
It sounds peaceful. I think that's a good takeaway from this whole conversation. It's not about demonizing the internet or rejecting technology. It's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where we can embrace, the good parts of online book communities while still staying true to what makes reading so special.
I think you summed it up perfectly. It's all about finding that balance. And, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey, exploring how the online world is shaping, reading in the digital age, the challenges, the opportunities, the highs and the lows. But ultimately, it's your journey to define.
So to all you listeners out there, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep discovering the joy of reading in this digital age. No matter how the river of reading flows and changes, the power of stories to transport us, to teach us, and to connect us will always be there.